On a bustling Saturday afternoon, the city mall was alive with the usual weekend crowd. Families roamed the wide corridors, window shopping and enjoying their day out, while teenagers gathered in their favorite hangout spots, laughing and chatting animatedly. Among the happy chaos was a young girl named Emily, only 8 years old but with a spirit as vibrant as the colorful ribbons tied in her hair. Emily was particularly excited today because her mother had promised her a visit to the new toy store in the mall after their lunch. As they walked through the mall, Emily's eyes sparkled with curiosity, taking in every storefront and the various displays that caught her attention. Her mother, holding her hand gently, smiled down at her, happy to see her daughter so cheerful. As they passed a small cafe, Emily's attention shifted toward a tall figure in a dark blue uniform. It was Officer Jake, a well-known figure in the community, recognized for his friendly demeanor and the shiny badge that always seemed to catch the light. He was standing near the fountain, observing the crowd with a practiced eye, ensuring everything was safe and peaceful. Feeling brave, Emily tugged on her mother's hand, pulling her to a stop. "Mom, look, it's Officer Jake. Can I wave to him?" she asked, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Of course, sweetie," her mother replied, releasing Emily's hand so she could wave. With a wide grin, Emily waved energetically at Officer Jake, hoping to catch his attention. The officer, who was scanning the crowd, turned towards the source of the enthusiastic wave. When his eyes met Emily's bright ones, his stern expression softened into a warm smile, and he waved back at her. Encouraged by his response, Emily pulled on her mother's hand again, whispering excitedly, "Can we go say hi to him, please?" Her mother nodded, and together they approached Officer Jake, who bent down to Emily's level as they neared. "Well, hello there, young lady. What's your name?" he asked, his voice friendly and inviting. "I'm Emily," she replied, her voice a mixture of pride and excitement. "I see you around a lot. You keep everyone safe, right?" "That's right, Emily," Officer Jake responded, his smile widening. "It's my job to make sure everyone here can have a good time without any trouble." Emily looked up at him with admiration. "That's really important," she said earnestly. "Thank you for keeping us safe." Officer Jake chuckled, touched by her sincerity. "You're very welcome, Emily. It's always easier when we have such observant young citizens like yourself around." As they talked, Emily's observant eyes caught a glimpse of something unusual. She noticed a man wearing a heavy jacket despite the mall's warmth, looking out of place as he hovered near a jewelry store across from where they stood. Something about him didn't seem right, and her brow furrowed slightly as she tried to make sense of it. Officer Jake noticed the change in Emily's expression, her eyebrows knitting together as she stared across the mall. "What's on your mind, Emily?" he asked, observing her concerned look. "There's a man over there," Emily said quietly, pointing subtly with her small finger. "He keeps looking around and touching his pocket. It seems weird." Her mother glanced nervously in the direction Emily was pointing, trying to spot the man. "Maybe he's just waiting for someone," she suggested, trying to ease her daughter's worry. But Officer Jake took Emily's observation seriously. He straightened up, still keeping his voice low and calm to avoid alarming them. "You have sharp eyes, Emily. Let's keep an eye on him for a little while, just to be sure everything's okay," he said, subtly turning his body to get a better view of the suspicious individual without making it obvious. The man was standing near a jewelry store, occasionally glancing inside before looking away whenever someone passed by him. His behavior was indeed unusual, and Officer Jake's instincts told him something might be off. He thanked Emily for her alertness, appreciating her keen observation, which was not very common in children her age. "Stay here with your mom for a minute, okay? I'm just going to walk over there and see what's happening," Officer Jake whispered, giving them a reassuring nod. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She watched as Officer Jake casually walked toward the area near the jewelry store, pretending to check the nearby shops. As he walked, he subtly clicked the button on his radio, alerting the mall's security team to be on standby without causing any panic among the shoppers. Meanwhile, Emily and her mother stood by the cafe, trying not to make it obvious that they were watching the scene unfold. Emily's mother was impressed by her daughter's attentiveness and felt a growing respect for the officer's prompt yet cautious response. As Officer Jake approached, the man seemed to notice him. He shifted uncomfortably, looking around as if trying to decide whether to stay or leave. His hand moved to his pocket again, fidgeting with something inside. Jake observed all these details keenly, gathering information on the man's behavior and appearance. Back at their spot, Emily clutched her mother's hand tightly, watching as the scene unfolded with wide eyes. She felt like she was part of something important, her heart racing with the excitement of a real-life adventure unfolding right before her eyes. Her mother kept her close, whispering assurances, telling her that everything was going to be okay and that Officer Jake would handle the situation. Emily's initial observation had set in motion a careful watch over a potential problem, showcasing not only her attention to detail but also the effectiveness of community members, even as young as she, in assisting law enforcement. As the minutes passed, the tension grew subtly in the air, with more security personnel appearing nonchalantly in the vicinity, ready to act on Officer Jake's cue. As Officer Jake continued his discreet approach, the suspicious man seemed increasingly uneasy. He looked over his shoulder repeatedly, his eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for an escape route. Every so often, his gaze would dart back to the interior of the jewelry store, his interest clearly fixated on the gleaming displays of necklaces and rings. Back where Emily and her mother stood, Emily's grip on her mother's hand tightened. Her mother looked down at her, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "You did the right thing by telling the officer," she whispered, proud of her daughter's attentiveness. "Is he a bad man, Mommy?" Emily asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and concern. "We don't know yet, honey," her mother replied gently. "But Officer Jake will figure it out. It's important to pay attention to what's happening around us and to tell someone if something doesn't seem right." Meanwhile, Officer Jake had positioned himself near a bench that offered a clear view of the man and the store. Pretending to be checking his phone, he observed the man's actions. His experience told him that people planning to do something wrong often show signs of nervousness like this man was displaying. Just then, the man took a step towards the store's entrance, but paused as a family walked out, laughing and oblivious to the tension building around them. He pulled his hand out of his pocket, revealing a small, crumpled piece of paper, which he looked at briefly before shoving it back into his jacket. Seeing this, Officer Jake quietly communicated over his radio, describing the man's behavior and appearance to the security team. He gave a subtle signal to a nearby security guard, who nodded understandingly, and began to close the distance in a non-threatening manner. The man seemed to sense the closing net. His eyes flickered with indecision, and he took another look at the store entrance, his body tensed as if ready to make a sudden move. Emily watched intently, her eyes wide with the thrill of watching real-life action unfold. Despite the potential danger, she felt safe beside her mother and under the watchful eyes of Officer Jake and the mall security. Her mother kept her close, occasionally pointing out subtle movements of the officer and security that Emily might not notice. "This is what being alert is all about," her mother explained quietly. "See how Officer Jake isn't rushing in. He's being smart, making sure he understands what's happening before he decides what to do next." Emily nodded, her focus split between her mother's words and the unfolding drama. She felt a new respect for the police and security guards who had to deal with such situations. Just as the man made a slight movement toward the store, Officer Jake stood up from the bench, his demeanor calm but authoritative. The man noticed and stopped, his body language shifting from suspicious to caught. It was clear he realized that his actions were being monitored, and he was no longer just an unnoticed observer in the crowd. The tension peaked as everyone waited to see what he would do next, with Emily gripping her mother's hand, watching the scene, knowing she had helped make the mall a safer place. As the man hesitated, clearly aware that he was being watched, Officer Jake made his move. He walked towards him calmly, but with a purpose, his presence commanding yet non-threatening. The man's eyes flicked towards Jake, then back to the store, indecision written all over his face. "Hello there," Officer Jake started, keeping his voice friendly yet firm. "Is there something I can help you with today?" His approach was tactful, aiming to engage the man without escalating the situation. The man stuttered slightly, taken aback by the directness of the encounter. "No, I was just looking," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. His hands fidgeted nervously, and he seemed to shrink under Jake's steady gaze. Observing from a distance, Emily watched with bated breath, her earlier anxiety now mingled with fascination. She saw the way Officer Jake handled the situation with such calmness and professionalism. It was like watching a scene from her favorite TV shows, only this was real and happening right in front of her. Jake continued, "It's a nice store, isn't it? They got some beautiful pieces, but you seem a bit anxious. Are you sure there's nothing you want to talk about?" The man shook his head, but his eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. At this moment, backup discreetly surrounded the area, positioning themselves in a way that didn't alarm other shoppers, but closed off any easy exits for the man. "We like to keep this place safe and happy for everyone," Jake explained, his tone still even. "Sometimes people come here when they're feeling a bit lost or unsure. We're here to help with that too." The man nodded slowly, the fight seeming to drain out of him. It was clear he was reconsidering his earlier intentions, now aware of the attention he had drawn. Meanwhile, Emily's mother leaned down, whispering, "See how Officer Jake is talking to him. He's trying to help him, not just catch him doing something wrong. It's important to understand why people do things, not just what they do." Emily nodded, absorbing the lesson. Her eyes remained fixed on the unfolding scene, her initial fear now transformed into a deep curiosity about human behavior and the ways it could be guided towards better outcomes. Officer Jake noticed the shift in the man's demeanor and gently asked, "Why don't we step aside and talk a bit more privately?" He gestured to a quiet corner away from the curious eyes of the public. The man hesitated, then nodded, allowing Jake to guide him away from the crowd. As they moved, Jake's backup subtly dispersed, maintaining a watchful eye but retreating enough to give them space. Emily squeezed her mother's hand, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Officer Jake had managed the situation with such skill that even the man who had seemed so threatening moments ago was now willing to talk and perhaps find a peaceful solution to his troubles. This lesson in empathy and authority wasn't something Emily would soon forget. It wasn't just about catching the bad guys. It was about understanding people and helping them find their way back. As she watched Officer Jake lead the man away, she felt a newfound respect for the roles that law enforcement and security played in everyday life, making her feel safe in this big, bustling world. In the quieter corner of the mall, away from the eyes of the public, Officer Jake and the man sat down on a bench. The atmosphere here was less charged, more conducive to conversation. The man, who seemed to have lost some of his initial tension, finally looked directly at Jake, his face a mix of resignation and relief. "So tell me what's going on," Officer Jake encouraged gently, his tone devoid of judgment. "Everyone faces tough times now and then. Maybe I can help." The man took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging slightly as if he were unloading a heavy weight. "I lost my job a few weeks ago," he began, his voice low. "I've been trying to keep up with bills, rent. Then my daughter's birthday came, and she wanted this special necklace she saw here. He trailed off, shaking his head, the distress clear in his eyes. Officer Jake listened intently, nodding in understanding. "It sounds like you've been through a lot. It's tough to feel like you're letting down the ones you love. But taking something that isn't yours isn't the answer. It can lead to more trouble than you're already facing." The man nodded, his eyes meeting Jake's. "I know. I realized that when you came over. I guess I just felt so desperate. I wasn't thinking straight. I don't want to be a bad example for my daughter." "That's a good place to start," Jake responded warmly. "Acknowledging that is important. There are better ways to solve these problems, and I'm here to help you find them." From her distant vantage point, Emily watched the interaction, her young mind trying to piece together the complex emotions and situations unfolding before her. Her mother gently explained the importance of compassion and understanding in difficult times. "Sometimes, people just need a little help and someone to listen," her mother said. "Officer Jake is doing a great job in helping that man find a better solution." Back at the bench, Officer Jake was already taking action. He pulled out a small notebook and scribbled down some information. "Here are some local resources that can help you," he explained, handing the paper to the man. "There's a job center that offers resume help and job search services, and a few charities that can help with immediate needs like food and rent." The man took the paper, a glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. "Thank you, officer. I didn't expect. I thought you'd just arrest me." "Helping out is part of the job too," Jake said with a smile. "But remember, taking anything that doesn't belong to you is wrong, no matter the situation. Promise me you'll try these resources first." "I promise," the man replied, his voice firmer now, bolstered by the support he received. As they stood up from the bench, the man extended his hand to Jake, who shook it firmly. "Good luck," Jake said, clapping the man on the shoulder as they parted ways. Watching this resolution, Emily felt a profound lesson had been imparted on her young mind. Problems could be overwhelming, but there were always solutions that didn't involve making bad choices. She felt a rush of admiration for Officer Jake, not just for his role in keeping the mall safe, but for his kindness and wisdom in handling difficult situations. As they finally left the mall, Emily held her mother's hand tightly, feeling grateful for the peace and safety she often took for granted, now understanding a bit more about the complexities of the adult world. With the situation at the mall resolved peacefully, Officer Jake returned to his patrol, feeling satisfied that he had managed to help someone in distress find a better path. The man left the mall, not with stolen goods, but with a list of resources and a renewed sense of hope. It was small victories like these that made Jake love his job, knowing he could make a real difference in someone's life. Emily and her mother continued their shopping day, but the events of the afternoon lingered in Emily's mind. As they walked through the mall, her mother decided it was a good time for a treat and suggested they stop for ice cream. Sitting at a small table with their ice cream, Emily's mother opened up a conversation about what had happened. "What did you learn from today?" she asked, gently stirring her ice cream with a spoon. Emily thought for a moment, her spoon hovering above her bowl. "That being brave can help others," she finally said. "And that problems have more than one solution." "That's right," her mother nodded. Officer Jake could have handled that situation very differently, but he chose to help instead of punish. Emily's eyes sparkled with understanding, and because he helped the man, maybe that man will help someone else someday. Like a chain of helping. Her mother smiled at this insight. "Exactly, Emily. Helping creates more helping. And noticing when something doesn't seem right and saying something about it, like you did, is part of that chain." Encouraged by her mother's words, Emily felt proud of her role in the day's events. She understood that her actions, even as a child, could have big impacts. Their conversation was interrupted when Emily spotted Officer Jake walking by their area. Excited, she waved him over. "Officer Jake, we're having ice cream. Would you like some?" Jake grinned and approached their table. "Well, I shouldn't, but how can I say no to such a kind offer?" He pulled up a chair and sat down with them for a moment. As they all enjoyed their ice cream, Emily and her mother thanked him again for what he did. "It was amazing to see how you handled everything today," Emily's mother said. "We're really thankful for people like you." Jake accepted the thanks gracefully. "I'm just glad I could help." And it was Emily's alertness that set everything in motion. "You should be very proud of her." Emily beamed, feeling a warm glow of pride. The conversation flowed easily, with Jake sharing funny and interesting stories from his job, making sure to keep them light and suitable for Emily's ears. They laughed and enjoyed the unexpected shared time. As they finished their ice creams and said their goodbyes, Jake stood up, tipped his hat to Emily, and said, "Keep being observant and caring, Emily. You're going to make a big difference in the world." Walking back to their car later, Emily felt inspired. She realized that the world was full of heroes in everyday situations, and that anyone, no matter how small, could be one of them. She squeezed her mother's hand, already looking forward to telling her friends about her day, and the lessons she had learned about kindness, courage, and the power of a helping hand. A few weeks had passed since the incident at the mall, and the memory of that day was still fresh in Emily's mind. Inspired by Officer Jake's actions and her own role in helping to prevent a theft, Emily started a small project at her school about community helpers. She wanted to share with her classmates the importance of being observant and helpful in everyday life. With her teacher's encouragement, Emily prepared a presentation about different community helpers like police officers, firefighters, and doctors. She focused particularly on how people could support these professionals and the importance of community vigilance. She even included a section about her experience at the mall, explaining how paying attention and speaking up could really make a difference. On the day of the presentation, Emily stood in front of her class, her poster board filled with pictures and notes. She spoke confidently, her voice clear and enthusiastic. She told her classmates about Officer Jake and the man at the mall, carefully explaining how a potentially bad situation was diffused through understanding and help rather than punishment. Her classmates listened intently, some of them amazed by the story, others inspired by the notion that even as kids, they had the power to contribute positively to their community. Her teacher, Mrs. Jensen, applauded Emily's initiative and suggested that the class start a community awareness program, inspired by Emily's example. Emboldened by her successful presentation and the support of her teacher and peers, Emily proposed starting a junior watch program at school. This would involve students being extra observant in their surroundings and learning how to report anything unusual properly and safely. Mrs. Jensen loved the idea and promised to discuss it with the school administration to get their approval. Seeing her initiative take shape, Emily felt a profound sense of achievement. She started to realize that even small actions could lead to big changes. The feedback from her peers was overwhelmingly positive, and many of them expressed their desire to join the Junior Watch program. Her mother, who came to school to watch Emily's presentation, was brimming with pride. After the presentation, she hugged Emily, whispering, "You're making a difference, Emily. Keep leading with your heart." On their way home, they talked about how important it was to stay engaged in their community and to always look out for each other. Emily felt inspired by her mother's words and was eager to continue building on the momentum she had started. That evening, as Emily sat at her desk at home, she began to jot down more ideas for her Junior Watch program. She thought about different ways to make it fun and educational for everyone involved. She planned to create badges for members, organize monthly meetings to discuss safety tips, and even invite Officer Jake to speak to the group. As the sun set, casting a warm glow through her window, Emily felt excited about the future. She knew that with determination and a caring heart, she could inspire others to take action and make their community a safer, happier place. Her small yet significant experience at the mall had sparked a passion for service that would continue to grow, shaping not just her path, but also encouraging others to follow in her footsteps. As weeks turned into months, Emily's Junior Watch program had become a popular part of her school. With support from her teachers and classmates, it had grown beyond just a watch group. It now included various activities such as regular safety workshops, community cleanup days, and even guest talks from local heroes like firefighters and paramedics. Officer Jake had become a regular visitor, sharing his experiences and teaching the kids important safety tips. The culmination of all this effort was the Community Hero Day organized by the school, spearheaded by Emily and her team. It was a special event to recognize local community helpers and raise awareness about safety and cooperation. Families, local media, and officials were invited to see the impact of the Junior Watch program. The school's auditorium was decorated with banners and posters made by the students, each depicting different aspects of community safety and the various helpers who keep their towns safe. Emily, wearing a specially made Junior Watch Captain badge, was buzzing with excitement and a little nervousness as she prepared to give her speech. As the auditorium filled up, Emily looked out at the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. There were her classmates, their families, and many faces from around the community, all there because of an idea she had brought to life. When it was time for her speech, Emily stepped up to the podium with confidence. She began by thanking everyone for coming and then shared the story of how a simple act of alertness at the mall had inspired her to start the Junior Watch. She talked about the importance of everyone's role in keeping the community safe, not just the police or firefighters, but every individual, including children. Each of us can be a hero in our own way, Emily said, her voice clear and strong. By being observant, by caring for each other, and by working together, we make our community a better place. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, moved by the words of such a young person showing wisdom beyond her years. After the speeches, the event continued with demonstrations by the police and fire departments and interactive safety games organized by the Junior Watch members. Officer Jake, who had quietly taken a seat in the back to watch Emily speak, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the crime he had prevented that day at the mall. It was about influencing a young mind to take positive action, which had now spread throughout the community. As the event drew to a close, Emily's mother came over, her eyes glistening with tears of pride. She hugged Emily tightly, whispering, "You did something wonderful, Emily. You've made us all so proud." The local newspaper covered the event, highlighting Emily's initiative and the positive impact of the Junior Watch program. The article praised the program for enhancing community spirit and safety awareness among children. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her journey from a simple observant moment to a community leader had been unexpected but deeply rewarding. She knew this was just the beginning, and she was eager to see how much more she could contribute, inspired by the belief that no matter how small, anyone could make a difference. This was her new dream: to inspire and be inspired, continually fostering a safer, kinder world.